Hello, beautiful souls, and welcome to the Persistence in Prayer podcast hosted by Catholic mindset coach, wife, mother, educator, and speaker Kylie Hine. Kylie is passionate about helping you deepen your relationship with God through the power of prayer. This podcast is a space for high achievers who want to do it all, but also want to prioritize their spiritual life and grow in faith. Join us as we explore the beauty of persistence in prayer and the transformative impact it can have on our lives. Get ready to discover practical tips, insights, and inspiration to help you develop a daily prayer practice and cultivate a deeper sense of trust in God's plan for your life. Let's journey together towards a more fulfilled and faithful life as we invite the Holy Spirit in. Let's begin. Hello, everyone, and welcome back. This is going to be a super powerful, exciting interview. I have been waiting for this one for a while now. Today, I am joined by Laura Roland. Laura is a Catholic wife, mother, grandmother, certified Catholic motivation code coach, which we're going to explain here in a minute, and you guys are going to love this. She is a speaker and a writer. Through her coaching, speaking, and writing, she is on a mission to help women in all stages and seasons of life discover the unique ways God has created them to live out their personal vocation, experiencing a deeper sense of fulfillment and joy. Laura, welcome and thank you so much for being here.
Oh, Kylie, thank you so much. This has been on my heart for a long time since you and I first had a conversation about it. So I'm really, really, really excited to dive in and to talk more about motivation code and how it just is a wonderful, wonderful tool to help women live out their personal vocations. So love it.
I know I'm going to learn so much. I learned so much just from chatting with you the other day. Before we jump in too far, though, I would love it. Could you just tell us a little bit about you, your husband, where you're located, share about you?
Yeah, sure. So I am first and foremost a wife to my husband, Matthew. We've been married for 34 years, and please God, could we have that many times that many more in your perfect timing and plan? I know everybody says this, but I really mean it. I got the best one of the bunch. Matthew means gift from God, and he truly, truly is that for me. We have three adult children. I have two bonus in law children, and the best part about me these days is that I am also a grandmother to two boys who are 2 and 6 months old. And my kids are spread out all over the place. And so I am a traveling grandmother who works. How about that?
Mhm.
That's my new moniker here. Originally a Catholic educator, hung up my whiteboard markers when I ended my career at the Archdiocese of Washington, D.C. I was the assistant superintendent for Catholic identity and accreditation and left that position in 2018, started a women's ministry, did some speaking and writing. COVID hit. So that sort of put a little monkey wrench in that plan for me, which was fine. Still doing women's ministry, but then I did a really brief stint at Hallow, which was the best job I never ever knew I wanted or needed. So I worked for that beautiful startup company I was on their content side of the house. And I left that position in February to resume speaking and writing. And then in July, the Lord, and as he so often does, says, you know what, let's take a little detour. And he put motivation code coaching on my heart and just made straight that little crooked road I was on and brought about the opportunity to launch this coaching business. And so I've been doing this full time I did a soft launch in August of 2023. It's not 2023 anymore, is it? I almost
It's
said this year. So
2024.
I can really say last year in August did a soft launch. And then the middle of September went at it full time. And since then, I've worked with over 20 women just in that short amount of time, helping them discover their why, what drives them, what gets them out of bed in the morning, what excites them, and where they thrive. And it is just the most amazing work that I get to do these days.
And I think you are 100% suited to it. I think you have truly followed where God has led you. So it's your yes. I'm so grateful for your yes. I would love, before we even talk about what the motivation code is, you talk about the power of ordinary. I've heard you talk about this before. And I know in my mind this is a wonderful thing, right? Ordinary is a wonderful thing. But my brain wants to resist this and fight this and say, no, we're supposed to be extraordinary and I should be doing all of these things, but that sometimes leads me to be overwhelmed. So, can you just share what is the power of ordinary? Why is this something that we should pay more attention to?
Sure. So you are in good company, Kylie. Most everyone that I talk to when I first bring up this topic of power of ordinary, they have that same reaction. There's actually like an adverse reaction, like I'm ordinary, but that's kind of the point. And so when I talk about the power of ordinary, and this is one of the keynotes that I give, it's retreats that I offer, all that. And again, the first reaction of people is like, ew, I don't want to be ordinary. That's pretty blah. That's milk toast, whatever. But when we really unpack this idea of ordinary, it kind of comes down to like an 80-20 rule for us. And so on any given day, there are 20% of us in the world who are called to do just the most amazing things, right? Like we've got people who can speak so eloquently and defend the faith, right? They're out there doing all those things. Um, there are people whose stories are so powerful and impactful that they are moving and changing lives all over the place. And then so that's like 20% of us on any given day. And you and I might be in that 20% on any given day. Like today, your podcast, someone's going to hear something that you've said or that I've said, and we'll be that 20%, right? But it just in that moment. But the reality is that that leaves about 80% of us on any given day to do the ordinary work of life, the things that still have to get done. And so by that, what I mean is like, really, the Lord left us these ordinary things to do. We are called to be his hands and feet. And how do we do that? We do it by just those ordinary things that we do every day. We rock those babies in the middle of the night. Maybe we make our spouse dinner when we've already worked a full day and we're so tired. We don't, where's the energy coming from? But we love him enough that he has a need that we're going to meet. So we're going to make him that dinner. Maybe it's taking your elderly parent or grandparent to a doctor when you really don't have time to care for yourself. Maybe it's taking food to a neighbor that you know is having a really rough go of it. Maybe that ordinary thing that you do is helping out at your parish Bible study or the Sunday school program. To you, it's just how life gets done. But to the rest of the world, you are really the hands and feet. You are bringing Jesus in every single moment, every need that you meet, every person you encounter in those ordinary, everyday things that we do that we just say is life. And so that's really the power of ordinary. It's in those moments, it's in the center of that where we encounter Jesus and we bring Jesus to the other in those simple actions. It's funny. I had that true honor to speak to a group of Catholic daughters of the Americas. And if you don't know about them, you can
Mhm.
find out more about them. They've been around for about 100 and some years, and these are the women that are just like moving and shaking in the world. And my prayer before I spoke to them. This was back in October. I said, Lord, how do you talk to women who what can I possibly share with them about their lives? And to the woman afterwards, they were like, I've never had anyone acknowledge that what I do has meaning. It's
Wow.
just so ordinary. But the reality is that to the person that you're doing it for, you're Jesus. And that's what he's left us. So the ordinary of the people, the ordinary people of the world, those ordinary everyday things that we do, there's so much power behind it. And it's really it's fulfilling that call to love in that moment. And so that's the power of ordinary. And when I'm done and I ask the women, okay, how do you feel about being ordinary? They're all like, yeah, I'm so ordinary. This is great stuff. So it's really about just seeing it through that lens. It's about a mindset shift around the everyday things. And the reason that that message is so important, Kylie, is that sometimes we think we are too ordinary, that there's no plan for our life, there's no purpose for our life. Those those ideas and thoughts get planted really early in life for some of us. That loop that plays, um, that gets planted really early. My story is part of my talk, and it happened for me around age 9, and that's a conversation for another day. But but something about that says, we're too plain, we're not perfect enough, we're not pretty enough, we're not enough of anything for the Lord to really notice me or have a plan for my life. But the reality is that living our lives and answering that call to love is our plan. And we do have a plan and a purpose. Um, and once we understand that about ourselves, we give our yes, Lord, I will way more readily. We understand that, yeah, there's meaning to my life, and I have a mission that only I can fulfill. And
I think
that's
that's
the power of ordinary.
so beautiful. I have two thoughts. We talked about Catholic daughters. I recently started going to Legion of Mary, which is another group that is in my church, and it is very, very small. There are not a lot of younger men or women in this group, but the ones who are there, they have been they go out, they do home visits, they go mass, the priest takes communion to those who are in nursing homes or homebound, and they're just constantly reaching out to people and sharing about the love of our blessed mother. And to them, everything seems so ordinary. It's ordinary for them to go pick up people and bring them to mass. And that is so foreign to me. So being around them has been so inspirational. And I think that's what I hear you saying is what is ordinary to some of us is in fact extraordinary to others. And we fluctuate between that 20% and 80% on any given day. It's not always the same 20% of people.
Right. Right, exactly, exactly. And I think when we can understand that, Kylie, like I said, we're more willing to give our less yes, Lord, I will, because we understand that God is with us always. And that, when we give that yes, Lord, I will, that what we're really doing is bringing him to others out as we're supposed to be, as he's created us to do. So it's amazing. I actually had one of the ladies at this event in October come up to me afterwards. She goes, she goes, I just kept waiting for you to use that word extraordinary.
Ah,
And I said, I leave that word out on purpose because for some people, the idea of extraordinary, it's too much pressure. Extraordinary people are powerful and they are the popular ones and they are seen all the time and they have to perform all the time like they're just over the top, and for some people that's too much pressure for them, and so they actually don't like that word extraordinary. So I let people discover their own words around what that actually means and come to their own understanding of it. I think that's something that they take to prayer, and then they and the Lord have a really good talk about it.
yeah,
So
which I think this
yeah, it's
is
a
ties in perfectly with motivation, which we are going to jump into. So the M code is short for motivation code. Can you just explain what this is, what it is that you do of all the things that you could have been certified in? I mean, there's strengths finders, working genius, all of these personality tests, but M code's a little bit different. What is M code?
Sure. So, M code or motivation code assessment is a narrative based framework that gets at really where you as an individual experience the deepest sense of fulfillment. You might use satisfaction. I prefer the word fulfillment. The deepest sense of satisfaction as a result of actions that you've taken. And when we look at that, where that sense of fulfillment comes from, what the actions are, we get a really good picture of what is at our core, what motivates us, right? So any decision we make, any action that we take is based on a deep desire, a deep motivator to do something. And so the motivation code assessment was founded by the Miller family, Dr. Arthur Miller. This has been around for about 60 years. I like to say it's kind of the best kept secret in terms of personal development and growth, uh, and really how to live out your personal vocation. So that's where the Catholic part of this comes into play. Um, the fact that it's narrative based makes it completely different from anything else that's out there. And I'd like to say just at the outset here that there is, the all of the other assessments that you can take. Those are fantastic assessments that give you great information about yourself. So this isn't a comparison of one is better than the other, but they really are different in that this is narrative based, and we start with stories, your stories of fulfillment. We look at using something called the system for identifying identifying motivated abilities. Sorry, that is a mouthful.
Mhm.
It's called SEMA. It really gets at, 60 years of research about what really does drive people, what motivates them at their core. You and I, at the moment of our conception, were sealed with something that only we can do. We were sealed with a plan and a purpose. We see this in scripture over and over again. And what helps us to live out that personal vocation is this set of motivators that we have. And that's what the motivation code assessment helps you to understand. So when you take the assessment, like I said, we start with your 4 fulfillment stories that you write. And from that, we start to see patterns of motivation. We start to see how you show up in the world at what I say, your best self, your authentic self. And from there, we get your top 5 core motivators. So there are 32 motivators. Just by virtue of the fact that you're human, you have 32 motivators. And it doesn't mean that, just because we look at your top 5 doesn't mean that like, oh, like I have no motivation for other things. The reality is that you are highly motivated and you are going to show up as your most authentic self when you're working from your top 5 motivators as opposed to your very bottom motivator. And we can in the coaching that I do, I unpack that with individuals because everyone's code is individualized. So how do you know that the results are really authentically yours? So other assessments, you sort of compare yourself to others. So I prefer to go out on a Saturday night as opposed to stay in. If all of my friends are doing X, I prefer to do so. That gets more at prep. Though some of those other assessments get at preferences. This gets at, tell me about this particular experience. Why did you feel this way? What about it was fulfilling? And so it uses your own words and it uses 60 years of research in, again, motivated abilities to help you sort of rank your motivators. And from there, you learn a lot about how you actually show up in the world as your most authentic self. Um, and by that, I mean that like you are thriving. It's like what gets you out of bed in the morning. It's what drives you. It is where you feel at your core like, this is who I am. This is the part that I've been missing. So I don't know if you're like me. I've taken just about every assessment that's out there. I'm like,
Yeah.
I gotta know, like, what is this? Because sometimes this makes no sense to me whatsoever. And it wasn't until I actually took the motivation code for the first time a few years ago through the Given Institute. So if you don't know what the Given Institute is, it is a Catholic with young women's leadership program forum. So part of what the young women go through, and I'm a mentor for that, and the mentors like go through is this motivation code. And when I took it the first time, my mind was blown. I literally ran into my husband's office after taking it, and I'm like, I finally make sense to myself. like,
Mhm.
like, oh my gosh. What I love about this is that it gives us language to use about ourselves. Like I knew stuff about myself, but I didn't have the language to explain it. And now that I do, it was a total game changer for me. And I've seen it in the clients that I've worked with as well. So the fact that it's narrative based, you can be sure that it is about you. It's your unique code. As a matter of fact, the odds. I love this statistic. It's my favorite part of the 17-page report. My favorite statistic is that the chances of you and someone else having the exact same code is 1 in 27 million. That's M million.
Yes.
And then when you look at the dimensions of motivation, which sort of give you even more detailed information, it goes, it's just exponentially. The odds are so far out there that you and somebody else would have the exact same code showing up in the exact same way it's impossible. So there really is only one you, and that's how you've been designed. And when women, especially I work specifically with women right now, but when women understand that, it's a very freeing um, outcome for them in a lot of ways.
Yes. I think just like you said, we always have to go back to identity of who we are. And what I love about the motivation code is it kind of helps us discover the why certain things make us feel on fire and other things don't. because different scenarios that might be very similar, but our motivation behind why we showed up for those scenarios could be different. And that might be the difference between feeling like we're really doing God's work and not doing God's work. And like you said, it gives us the language to truly articulate what our identity is and who we are and how God created us in very specific ways. And it is different. So I know my top 5, and when I first read it, I was like, "Oh." My first one, my first answer, I was like, "Oh, what a bummer." But when you explained to me what it meant, I was like, "Oh, I get it. This is perfect. This does explain who I am and why I am this way." So, are there any patterns that you notice with what something that comes up for me a lot in any type of assessment is achiever. That's just one of the key themes that shows up. I'm usually all over the board. If there's different categories, I have something from every category. But achiever always shows up somewhere near the top, if not at the very top. Are there any patterns that you notice with women who have achiever show up in this particular code?
Yeah, so, it didn't surprise me after meeting you and then we had our conversation that you had the beautiful motivation code that you have. You have a little bit of visionary in you, but you definitely have achiever in there. And so the thing to understand about M code, and I'll start with this first and then get to your question because I think it's critical for people to understand is that M code is it's not it's not a checklist of like these are things that I can do.
Right.
These are ways that you are motivated. So somebody who is highly motivated to let's use the one be key, Key. They used to call it be central, but be
Mhm.
key, right? That is within something called the dimension of motivation of the achiever. Okay. And so under achiever in this category, if you will, there are 6 motivators that all fall within these particular, let's just say, overarching themes of being an achiever. You're going to have some of these characteristics, right? Some of these are going to be what you motivate. So for you, let's just say that it's a B key, right? So somebody who is who's highly achieving, like super highly achieving, they're going to be as a person who is highly motivated to be key. What that means is that they're highly motivated to be a central figure. They are sort of like the hub of any organization. They're highly motivated to support other people in their positions, to be that head communicator, to be the person that has all of the historical knowledge of an organization. They are the go-to person who knows the who, what, where, when, and why of anything about that place on any given day. Right. So that's just one example of you've got the category of achiever or
Mhm.
dimension of achiever, and there's one motivator in there. So what I typically see and I've worked with a lot of high achievers so far this year, because here's the thing about high achievers. They want to know all the things. They're like, what don't I know about myself? And how can I learn it? Because I am always looking to be the best version of myself. And I want to be the best version of myself before anybody else can be the best version of themselves. There's a little bit of competition and there's a lot of comparison with themselves. So, what do I mean by that? High achievers, what I have found is that they want to know everything before anybody else so that they can sort of be ahead.
Yes.
And that's not a and I mean that and I say that with all of the love in my heart. It is not a bad thing, and I want anybody listening to this to understand this. There are no bad motivators, right? We're gonna just strike the word bad from here because bad is a judgment. Bad is leads to comparison, which is a slippery slope. And I'm gonna talk more about that in just a minute, right? So what we need to do when we're talking about our motivators as the- speaking to women specifically who are high achievers is that sometimes we are so busy wanting to grab the next thing like, oh, did I miss it? What is this? What's this missing piece? What's this, that we're out of order. Like everything that we're grabbing for all of these things, right? We want to know, we need to be up on the latest and the greatest of everything. Part of it's because we don't want to get caught short. Part of it's because we know that we are highly gifted and we want to use that for good. And so that drives us, but I got to know all the things so I can know how to use all the things. And the problem is that we spend so much time grabbing that we miss what's already there. And I think that's what M code does is that it gives you that solid foundation to work from that says, beloved daughter, I've created you this way. This is your core. At the core, this is who you are, and it's very good. And you can rely on these things. I don't want you to not be achieving. I've created you, but you have to get really clear about why you're achieving the way that you are. Because if we're not really clear and we're disordered, what happens? It's complete burnout. We're working against ourselves. We're working we're working with what she has, not with what we have.
Mhm.
And so that's a comparison. And it's not a fair comparison because she's different. I'm different, you're different. And so it's this idea of, when we're disordered, when we're out, we're grabbing at things, we're just doing all of this, right? None of that is pointing back to the Lord. And really, that's what we're here to do, right? Like everything that we're supposed to do, anybody we encounter, anything that we do is supposed to point back to the Lord, point ourselves, point our families, point who we're achieving with and for back to the Lord. And when we're not doing that, we get burnout. It's a lot of stress that's on us, and it's not good stress. High achievers, you actually like a deadline or two. You actually like a clear finish line. You actually like to know how fast can I get this in? You need it Tuesday? I think I'm going to do it
I
Monday
need a
because I can.
challenge.
And I like to. I need something to overcome. I need something to work towards. That's okay. Like those are good and holy desires, right? There's nothing wrong with that. But when we're coming at it from a place of, not how we're wired, then it shows up as burnout. It shows up as disengagement, malcontent. It shows up as like all we do is compare ourselves. Oh well, she got it done by Tuesday. I guess I'm gonna get it done by Monday, or I guess I'm not as good as she is. Right. And I know this is a gross generalization, but I think you understand where I'm coming from with that.
Mhm.
But here's the thing is that it's a very slippery slope then from comparison to envy. And oftentimes it's an unholy envy that we have of somebody. And then that leads to jealousy. And jealousy is the worst thing. That is no longer willing the good for the other when we're jealous. It's not that we don't want them to have, it's not that we just want what they have. We don't want them to have it anymore,
Mm.
which means I don't want them to have how God created them to be. And so it's just from that standpoint, this idea of grabbing at all of these other things when we don't really know and understand ourselves, that leads to this disordered thinking. But Kylie, when we know ourselves, when we take that time to really understand who we are as the Lord has created us to be, and that's what the motivation coach shows us. That's what we learn about ourselves. Suddenly we're no longer grabbing because we understand who we are and how the Lord's created us. And we say, oh, yeah, I like this. This makes perfect sense to me. There's nothing wrong with me. There's nothing wrong with me. I'm exactly perfect in how He's created me. And so those things sort of line up. And so I'd sort of do this like we're grabbing, 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 and suddenly we get our end code and things line up. And then we show up in the world as our true selves. And what do? We point back to the Lord. I am living proof. I am living proof of M code. For the longest time, I thought there was something wrong with me because I have this strong desire, just this drive, this deep need. Like it's like I said, at my core
Mhm.
to meet the needs of other people. And so I'll use the example with my children. When my kids were little, I knew exactly what to do. I knew what to do. I had to feed them, I had to clothe them, I had to bathe them, I had to educate them, I had to, introduce them to the Lord. I had to do all of those things. Oh my gosh, it was so clear the needs. Oh, here, let me do this. And then, like kids do, they become adults. And then they don't need me anymore in the way that I am used to being needed. And when I didn't have a clear need to be met, I started grabbing at, oh, well, maybe I'll do this, or maybe this, or maybe this, or maybe this, or maybe this. And I started comparing myself to other moms who had these, whose kids were still little and were still like making gingerbread houses. I don't have anybody to make a gingerbread house with. So and that's one thing. So then I overfunctioned. And one of the things I did was I bought my kids matching pajamas, my adult children matching pajamas. And I literally made myself physically ill over trying to find all the right sizes in the right pattern and get them shipped so we could all wear them on Christmas Day, and not one person really enjoyed it. I certainly didn't, because by that point I looked at them and I'm like, I hate everything about those pajamas. Like nothing about that brought me joy. Didn't bring them joy. I mean, it was a funny moment, but now it's a funny story. But I think you get my point. So like when we're high achieving, we just want what everybody else has because we think it's that missing piece for ourselves. And that's not the case. You've already got the complete picture. You just need to know what it is. That's sort of the tendency that I start to
You
see. And
just
again,
painted
it's a
such a beautiful picture. I mean, my brain is just like catching up to all of these wonderful pieces that you just so perfectly laid out. It just had me thinking about, I used to think that because I had the ability to function in a high stress state and many people did not, that that's what I was supposed to be doing. That I was supposed to function at that rate. That you talk about burnout, it's like, well, I can keep going. I can keep going. I can keep pushing through. And what I love about the M code is I'm looking at my results right now. And what's fascinating to me is learner is another thing that always shows up very high for me. But we're looking at the word learner from a motivation standpoint now. And it's actually really, really low for me. So
yeah,
I learn a lot of things. I'm high input, but I'm not motivated because I want to be an expert at it. I'm motivated because I want to help people.
yes.
And that's
Kylie,
very
what is
different.
your number one?
My
What is your
number
number
one
one
was
motivator?
evoke recognition.
Yes, right. So what you are highly motivated to do is you want to bring recognition, not to yourself, but you want to bring recognition to a cause or to other people. And so part of that is you will learn everything you can about a topic, and then you'll be like, hey, let's look at, did you know this? And here's a way that we can fix this. Here's a way that this organization or this prayer or this person that I just read about is going to be able to help you. It's almost like what we're doing here, right? Like you learned about M code first,
Yep.
and you did it out of a place of out of curiosity, right? You were like, what is this?
Yes.
Is this something I need to know about? Because again, you want to know the latest and greatest. You don't want to miss anything,
Right.
right? And so you
Mhm.
learned about it, but you didn't learn about it because you were like, oh my gosh, I'm going to go become an M code coach. Although you might, and that would be fantastic, right? But you did it so that you could evoke recognition about it, so that you could ultimately meet the needs of your listeners and the women that you coach and your family and your community and so on and so on and so on. Right. And so that's a wholly HOLY desire, as opposed to, oh, I just want to know all the things so I can be the smartest person in the room. There's a difference there. You're not motivated to be the smartest person in the room. You're motivated to learn all the things so that you can help other people become the best version of themselves. And so when we have language around that, again, motivation code gives you that language to really, really, really understand yourself and be able to speak about it in beautiful terms, right?
I
We
literally just
internalize
wrote
those
that
things.
down. This is a much healthier way to love who we are. The words around it.
Could you put that on my website for me?
Yeah.
Because I run out of language. Like I do. I run out of language and ways to say that. I love that's your takeaway from this. It's beautiful.
Yeah. Instead of I want to be the smartest person in the room, how you just explained that was it's such a healthier way to look at ourselves instead of beating ourselves up for the way that God created us. We can look at, okay, this is how God
Yeah.
created me. The one I hear a lot is like, I'm too much for somebody, or I'm not enough. Like, if I could just do
Yeah.
this thing, if I could just be this person, if I could just have this thing, then it would be enough for whatever the cause is. But if we can just look at how incredibly God created us and love that from a healthy place and have the verbiage to understand it.
So, when you keep buying all the books and signing up for all the things, but then everyone needs you and you start to fall apart. I hope Doodle women learn to discern which tasks to set down so that they can fully thrive in the ones that God created them for. I currently have openings at my 12-week one-on-one coaching program. We look specifically at you and your unique needs. If coaching is something that you've considered exploring, sign up for a free one-on-one exploration call today. Link is in the show notes.
Yeah.
Then we're not
Kylie,
chasing all of these things that we don't need to be chasing.
exactly. And I've lived a lot of years, a lot. And, you know, I heard it once said, and I'm going to butcher the quote, but I think I think I'll get to the essence of it is that, when we really sit back and think about it, and we really allow this to settle in our souls, it can be a game changer for us, is that each one of us, as the Lord has created us, is a unique answer to a very specific ache in this world, right? And answers to aches are not bad things. Like, there's nothing bad about that. It's a beautiful solution. It's a beautiful way to minister to others, right? To be present for others, to show up for others. And when we come at this from our true place of motivation, that's how we know when that ache is answered, when that prayer gets answered. Like, you are literally the answer to someone's prayer. Like, the things that you're putting out in the world, your podcast and your coaching, you are literally the answer to someone's prayer that you don't even know. A conversation that you had yesterday, when some of the things I've listened to, like some of the gems that you come up with, right? And you're sitting there in front of your microphone and you're like, I don't even know if this is going anywhere. The Lord knows where it needs to go. And when you step out into the world with that authenticity of, I am evoking recognition around this particular topic because the Lord has created me to do this. That's way different than being boastful about, look at what I just did. So it takes away the boastfulness. We don't need to be boastful in a false pride. We come at it from, this is what the Lord's created me to do, and it's urgent and holy work. Somebody needs this. The Lord's put it on my heart too hard for it to be otherwise. And so we understand that about ourselves, and it's a beautiful, I guess, like unveiling, if you will. We're stepping out and not being hidden anymore. Maybe that's what I'd like to say. We're not hidden anymore.
Yes. Um, Something that came to me in prayer, gosh, this was probably a year and a half ago. I remember sitting in prayer. I was still teaching at the time, but really discerning. I had been discerning for a lot of years of whether teaching was where God really wanted me, but didn't know what that next thing was. And I remember hearing the words, step out of the shadows. It's time to step out of the shadows. And that just hit me because although I have some extroverted tendencies, I very much like to keep to myself. And in a small room of people, if someone asks me my opinion, of course I will share and I will open up, but it's almost like I have to have permission to speak that. And so doing something like this where I am putting myself out there was not something I ever even considered or would look at. And so, when you talk about not being hidden, I think it's so
Mhm.
beautiful for women to recognize that we don't have to hide who we are. If we are a stay-at-home mom, we can love that that is the way that God has created us and called us to be ordinary and beautiful in doing that work, because not everyone can do that work the way that I see women doing that work,
Mhm.
whatever it
Yeah.
is that we are doing.
Yeah. It's so true. I think a lot. I think one of the greatest gifts the church has given us is our saints. those men and women that have gone before us and the saints among us right now, the ones with the small s and then the capital S that, someday in the future we'll get to see. And I think a lot about them, and they give me hope that if 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 I'm called to step out, that the Lord is going with me. He's actually gone before me. He's already cleared the way. Doesn't mean it's going to be easy. It doesn't mean it's going to be, not fraught with some lessons or some peril or whatever pushback, whatever it is. He's already gone before us to at least clear the way for us. And uh, I look at those saints and I just think, like, especially, I was thinking about them specifically around this idea of like our high achievers. Like, how did they still keep true to who they were? And they saw their work as ordinary. Mother Teresa, she didn't think anything she did was that extraordinary by the world's standards.
Right.
So again, we're called to be in the world, but not of the world. And so when we can look at who we are in terms of what we're really called to do, we can step out what knowing that the Lord has created us for what he's called us to do. So again, I look at Mother Teresa. She's been in my life since I was a teenager, and I remember seeing her when she was I don't know if she was on the cover of Time magazine or Newsweek, but was one of those. And this again, back in the days when there were magazines that got
Right.
published once a week that came to your mailbox. Yeah. And I, I opened it and I saw that picture of her, the craggy face picture of her. And I just remember thinking, she's the most beautiful woman I've ever seen. She was just so beautiful. And learning her life story and what she has done and all those things, you want to talk about a high achiever. That's Mother Teresa, but she's high achieving and she did what the Lord set out for her to do because she knew herself, and she knew as herself as the Lord created her. She didn't go out of her lane. She didn't try to grab anybody else's spotlight. She didn't try to be anybody other than who she was, but she had to know who she was first in order to be able to do that. I look at, Saint Zelly, her life story, the woman, she worked and she had very, I would say, highly achieving, highly motivated. I'd love to do her M code. Maybe that'll be in heaven
Yeah.
someday if I get there. But very driven, very, you could just see it in the way that her life was, but so much sadness and so much heartbreak. And in order to overcome those things, you have to really be motivated to get out of bed every day. So what was her yes? What was her why? What was her why to do the things that she did? I look at uh servant of God, Thea Bowman. So she's somebody that she needs to be a saint very soon. So Thea Bowman was an African American religious sister, and she did amazing, amazing things. Her life story is incredible, and she got cancer and died at a pretty young age, and you know fought through all of that, high achieving. Like, she had goals, and this woman was on a mission. And then, when you hear her speak, she's like her why was to make an impact, to evoke recognition, to bring people to the Lord. So these women, very differently motivated, I'm sure, but all high achievers, they had to know themselves and they had to really rest in the fact that this was the plan and the purpose that the Lord had for them. The last one I'll mention is a new person for me, and it's Walter Ciszek, and he wrote the book He Leadeth Me. He was a Jesuit priest, and he was imprisoned in the work camps in Siberia. And if you're not familiar with this story, it's an amazing story. And his whole point in his book was really, it got down to this idea of, what is your will for me today, Lord? Right.
Mhm.
And he achieved amazing things in that prison camp by just showing up. But that was the Lord's will for him every single day. And so it gets back to this point. And again, to especially women who are really striving, who are really wired to achieve a lot of things. I want you to take away this idea that, what is God's will for you today? And in order to live that out, you have to really know yourself. And then you have to really embrace all of that. And that's what EPCO does. really does. Yeah, and I am living proof. I would not be here today in this role speaking to you all the things if I had if I hadn't learned these things about myself and be able to say, yeah, it's good. I'm good. Like I'm good. There's
Hmm.
nothing wrong with me. This
Yeah.
is
These saints have
yeah.
such great one obedience. I think just obedience to following where the Lord calls them, not fighting it. Obviously,
Yeah.
humility. They don't recognize, like just like you said, they don't recognize the goodness of what they are doing because they are so humble. And I think it goes back to that, the high achievers have always striving for when is it enough? What is enough? If always feeling like, well, I could do more. Is the Lord calling me to more? But I think this is where we really have to pause and go back to like this present moment, Lord. What is your will for me today in this moment? Because we can get so caught up in what is your will for my whole life. And we want to have everything mapped out. We want to know, okay, Lord, well, if I'm supposed to achieve great things, what is this great thing? Because I need to get started on it right away. I need to have a plan. But right now, in this moment, I think if we can take that to prayer every single morning, Lord, what is your will for me today? What is your will for me in this hour?
Hmm.
We will have so much more peace.
Right. What's the next right thing that I'm supposed to do? And I love what you just said. Like sometimes we have to break it down hour by hour. You look at your to-do list and you're adding things all the time because it doesn't look like enough. Like, did I really get enough done today?
Yeah, the three things,
Right.
the prioritized three things. I'm like, nope, I need at least six.
You need at least 6 in order to be, to feel like you've done your due diligence for the day. And that's okay. Those are your obstacles to overcome. Those are your challenges to meet. Like you set those up for yourself, right? Like whatever the verbiage is that you use around that, right? That's fine. But that idea, love that idea of even just in that hour, like you sit down and you're like, okay, Lord, what's the next right thing that you will for me right now? And it takes that surrender, it takes that humility. And I would also like to add like this idea of humility that sometimes when we talk about ourselves, we're afraid to say the things that drive us, that motivate us, that we're good at. And I'm using that with, fake air quotes here
Hmm.
because, the world would tell us that's being prideful, that's being, a lack of humility. But when we can use the language about ourselves saying, the Lord has created me as X, Y, and Z, and I am all about the Lord's work today. So I'm gonna bring my full self and I'm gonna go get it done. And that's a difference than saying, you know what, I'm really good at whatever. And stand back because I'm just going to blow you away with all the things I could do. It's a maybe the same message, but you word it way differently, and one is way more true to to the messaging that we want out there
Yeah, one is
about
inviting and
ourselves.
from the Lord, and one is very
Yeah,
condemning and not from the Lord. When I even think of the word achiever, how often I have fought this word of I don't want to be like that. I feel like the Lord is calling me to slow down. And
yeah,
I fought that word. And when I read evoke recognition as my number one motivator, I was like,
yeah.
pride, you just said it, pride. I was like, this is a terrible, prideful thing. This is not, I was
Yeah.
ashamed to have that as my number one motivator. But when you broke it down for me, I'm like, this really is a beautiful thing. This is a good thing. And it doesn't mean that it's all about me, which is where
It's
my brain
using
instantly went.
it's using the gifts, it's using how the Lord's created you to shine the light on something else. And or someone else or a mission or in your case like a way to live, right? A better, holy, healthier way to live and to find a place where you thrive. It's funny because when you said the word achiever, so I went back to the 8 dimensions of motivation, and so these are the characteristics of that dimension of
Hmm.
motivation if you are an achiever, right? If you have these motivators that show up in that category is you're focused on personal performance and you enjoy when their contribution is distinctive or highlighted. Whether you intend to be the best or simply one of a kind, you seek to stand out in a way that elicits a response to what they do or who they are. Nothing in there is a judgment. Nothing in there says, make it all about me and all the things. It doesn't say like you elicit the response just for yourself or like you shine a light just on what you do, just so people can say, look how amazing Kylie is. And you are amazing, but not for those reasons. So it's all about when we understand that this is how the Lord has created us, it makes that a whole lot different. He's created you to elicit a response, to shine the light on some things, to help other people. And that's what you're using it for. That's what you're highly motivated to do. And nothing about that says this is a bad thing. It's actually,
Yeah.
yeah.
This is amazing. I think I could talk about this for several more hours. But
I'm happy to do that.
before we have to wrap up, I know, I think I'm gonna have you back again. Maybe we can focus on another dimension. Um,
Oh, I would love that. Sure.
I would love to hear, why do you feel like it is that God called you to this particular thing at this point in your life? I
Yeah.
think something we go back to with identity is we're all created uniquely. Just like you said, we're sealed at the moment of our conception with something that we were called to, this very unique purpose, and we all have it. I think many of us are still trying to figure out what it is, or most of us are figuring out what it is. So, what is it that makes you the right person for this thing?
Mm. Isn't that a question to be asking me today? Uh, gosh, I think, when I think back on my life, I feel like every single thing that I've done, and I've been working since I was 15. But every job that I've had, and I've had lots of jobs over the years, everything has prepared me for this particular season and stage of my life. And so when I look at my motivators, so my number one is to meet needs. And it was number one by far. Like it was like top, 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 top. It was, I think it was the 10, number 10. It got a 10. And then my next one was to make an impact. My third and fourth were develop and design, they were pretty close. And then the last one was to be unique. In other words, like to be different.
Mhm.
And so I think for me at this point in my life, like I had the benefit of a little bit of life under me. I've got the wisdom from living out my life imperfectly. Um, I used to be a person that just tried so hard. I'm a reformed people pleaser, which goes along with somebody that wants to meet the needs. The pajama story should tell you everything you needed to know about me back then. So I've done the work around really trying to understand what the Lord wants me to do. And I've tried all the things. I thought I needed to sit it like I wanted to. Am I supposed to be like a top tier speaker, Lord? Am I supposed to write 27 books, Lord? Like, I've tried all the things and nothing ever felt right. And, and I tried to outthink my way. I tried to just work. I thought, well, maybe I'm not working smart enough. Maybe I'm just too dumb. Maybe I'm just not intelligent enough to make this particular thing work. And the reality is that sort of like Goldilocks, none of those were my fit. And when I went through my M Code coaching with Dr. Miller, so not Arthur Miller, but his grandson, Dr. Joshua Miller, who's out of Franciscan University. When I did my training with him this summer, and we went through this, he said, "Tell me about your desire to coach other people." And I said, "I want other women to know there's nothing wrong with them." And he said, "I think that's your message." He said, "Everything
Mm.
about you
Yeah.
is about that." And it all just kind of clicked. And I know people who've known me really well have said, there's something different about you. There is something different about you. And it's not just the change in hair color. And in June, I had long blonde hair, believe it or
Oh,
not,
wow.
long blonde. And on a whim, I cut it short and went back to as close to my natural color as I could. And so it's short, dark. And with that brought a retransformation to who the Lord really wants me to be. This is the real me. And I want other women to know that this is possible for them, that they don't have to struggle, that they can accept who they are and step out into the world giving their yes more readily. Because we need that. We don't have time to waste, Kylie. I don't know if you're feeling it.
Hmm.
We don't have time to waste for us to be worried about, am I, what's my plan and my purpose? Get serious about it by having those conversations, because I need you. There's something that only you can do for me. There's something that only you can bring to the world. I'm talking to you collectively, right? Like, I need what you have. You need what I have. That's how we get this done. And we don't have any more time to waste about that. And so I want women to understand there's not, embrace who you are. You're beautiful, just the way the Lord made you, right? He looked around and it was very good, and you were part of that. And when we can put aside the comparisons and we can just rest in that, we show up in the world as our true and authentic selves. And the world notices. Our family notice, our friends notice, and there's a change. There's a change internally, and then there's a change outwardly too.
Yeah. And
So,
it does start
yeah,
internally. There were a dozen gold
yeah,
nuggets that you just mentioned. So I want to highlight just a couple. Um, you brought up time, and the parish that I went to this past weekend, the priest, his homily was on time. And something that really stood out to me was saying that when we die, our capacity to love, whatever capacity we've reached, that's what it is for all of eternity. And so when you said we can't wait, like we can't wait to learn how to love others better. We cannot wait to love ourselves better. We cannot wait to start loving God better, because we don't know when that last moment comes. And once we're there, like that's where we are for the rest of eternity. And that just hit me like we don't have this time to waste.
we don't. We don't. We have got to stop like hiding our lights, right? That's how we love others, when we shine, when we are at our best selves. That is loving ourselves enough. And then from there, we love others to that realm as well, or to that length as well.
Mhm.
Wow. That's a fantastic homily.
Yeah, I
I
know.
need that.
It was so good. But another thing you said is, for those of you who don't have it figured out, it's okay. You don't have to have everything figured out to love better. That is, we can strive to know more about ourselves, and we should strive to know more about ourselves, because as we come to know ourselves, we come to know God. But just like Laura said earlier, God is always preparing us. So even in these moments when maybe we're figuring out the family pajamas, this is part of preparing us for what is to come. That is a story that somebody needs to hear. And you could not have that story to tell if you had not gone through that moment. So remember that God is always preparing us. And then the beauty in the wait, like this beauty in waiting for what is to come. I try to remember this when I look at, and I have to look back at Jesus's life, of how many years were ordinary, how many years were the waiting and the growing, and it's painful. And, but there's that work has to be done. And you said it earlier. You said, I've done the work. This is why I can do this so well, is because I've done the work. And so if you feel like you're not there yet, if you're listening, you feel like you're not there, I still don't know what my purpose is. Just trust that there's still work to be done. We always still have work to be done, but it is beautiful work, and it is worth doing, because it's hard and it feels yucky sometimes, especially when we have to do
Yeah.
that inside work. That inside work is the hardest work to do, but
Yeah.
it's so worth it. And I think that's the
Yeah.
beauty of coaching, of the work
Yeah.
that you're doing, of the work that I'm doing, is it gives people the time and space to do that work that they would not do on their own, because
Mhm.
they're able to meet with someone, and they're able to, like you said, have the language and the vocabulary to understand what it is that is going on. Why do they do the things that they do, even when they don't want to be doing them?
Yeah. And I think if I could add one last point to that, Kylie, is that this idea of, gosh, we could do a whole nother podcast on the season of wait. It's one of the things I talk about. It's a Bible series that I've written, and it's powerful, that idea of it. But if you're not there yet, right? Um, because you're still figuring things out, give yourself that compassion that it's okay, A, to not have it all figured out, and B, that you still have a plan and a purpose, and that there's something that you can do in that moment. There's something the Lord is calling you to in the small, ordinary, everyday moments. They don't have to be the big things of figuring out my next career, or like, should I open a business, or should I be, should I switch to being a stay-at-home mom, or should I like be a part-time stay-at-home mom? Like, you know what I mean? Like, we don't have to, like, the things don't have to be so big figured out right now, but for us to say, oh, that's my plan and purpose. We have lots of plans and purposes, and it's in those ordinary everyday moments that those unfold. So just be on the lookout for those, right? Like get curious about, like, okay, have a little bit of wonder about what's the next right thing I should do today, not not when I'm 29, or not when I'm 45. Like, I need to have my whole life mapped out. What's next right thing for tomorrow? What's my plan and purpose for tomorrow? And so when we can look at it in those ways, it makes it more achievable. It makes it more doable. It makes it less scary, and it makes it less, we don't feel quite so much like a failure, like I haven't achieved something because I don't have it all figured out.
Yes,
So I hope that gives your listeners a little bit of hope in there with that too.
absolutely.
That's some benefit of hindsight there, for
Just
sure.
as Saint Ignatius would say, be aware. That's always the
Be
first
aware.
key. Be aware. Be aware of what's going on. Be aware of the moments in the ordinary every day. So beautiful.
Absolutely.
Okay,
Oh,
we are out of time. So I would like to close. I always end with either a prayer tip or a scripture verse that the guest has chosen. So I wanted to bring up, you had shared with me that you went from like an almost non-existent prayer life to some very key prayer practices. I think you listed four. You want to share about that experience, and then maybe some advice for someone who doesn't have a consistent prayer life? What helped you to kind of transition into what you do now?
sure. So I'll give you an overview of what my prayer life is now. So I read the mass readings for the day. I have two tools that I use in my toolbox. One is the Magnificat. Again, these aren't affiliate links. Like, I'm not promoting them. It's just what I use. So I've used the Magnificat for years. I read the daily mass readings. And I pray the morning lauds for the liturgy of the hours. And then at night before I go to bed, I do the nighttime prayer. If I am really, really good and on fire and super holy, as I like to say that day, I'll also do evening prayer. But I typically I don't get to evening prayer because 5 o'clock comes and I'm like, oh my gosh, I have a million other things I'm doing. So those are the things that I do. And I also try to go to adoration once a week, and now confession once a month. Adoration and confession. Adoration is where I do a lot of praying. It's where I do a lot of writing, actually. Uh, and then, of course, confession is where I become the best version of myself because I get rid of all the junk, which is fantastic. Up until a year ago, my prayer life was, hey, God, love you, mean it, thanks. Would go to
Hmm.
mass once a week, and, it was great. And I'd think about the homily for about 20 seconds until I got mad at somebody in the parking lot. And then I would forget everything about being a loving Christian. So last Lent, the Lord it was an adoration. I had gone, and the Lord just said, basically, I love when you're here. Those were almost his exact words to me. I love when
Wow.
you're here. And you have to know the Lord's voice. Some people hear it in their hearts. Some people actually hear it. Some people don't hear it at all. It's a feeling that they have. For everybody, it's different. But I actually will hear his voice. And so he was very clear about what he wanted me to do. He said, this is going to be your plan for Lent. And I want to spend time with you. And so this is how I want to spend time with you. I added to the list, oh, I'll go to daily mass 2 or 3 times a week. Well, I kept up with the things he put on my list. I didn't keep up with what I put on the list, which clearly meant he didn't care about that. He
Hmm.
wanted me in prayer time. And last year it was the most fruitful Lent I've ever had in my entire life. So much clarity, so much peace came from that. And when you have clarity and peace, you sort of get addicted to it in a good way, and you
Yeah.
don't want it to end. And it's those consolations that come. And not that I'm in search of consolation, but you just know that they are coming at some point, and they're
Right.
a unexpected grace. from that time. And so you sort of are like, oh, I'm just a much better human all the way around when I do these things. And so that's a practice that this non-routine, I am routine avoidant. I am not a routine gal in any way, shape, or form. And I have kept up that routine. So I would just encourage anybody who is routine avoidant like I am, start small, do the small things. And if you're not even in a place where you can pray, whether you're because you've been away from the Lord for so long, you're angry at the Lord, whatever it is, right? We all have our own things that we're carrying. Um, just here I am, Lord. That's a prayer. That's a prayer. It's a conversation starter. Sometimes it's just like, Lord, where are you? That's okay too. And sometimes it's just, Lord. That's a prayer.
Mm-hmm.
So I would just encourage you to start small and find what works for you. I mentioned before I worked for Hallow. The reason I worked for Hallow is because I was a Hallow app user before I worked for Hallow, and I loved it. They have, and again, this is not a plug for them for any reason other than it's something that I use, but I do use some of their Bible stories to listen to, and also some of their chanted music for me is also beautiful. You can find it on a non-Hallow app, which is great too. But for me, it's been a go-to place to have those things in one setting. So
So
I know it's not
beautiful.
everybody, not for everybody, but people don't want to be on their phones all the time. But for me, it's
Yeah. I just want to remind people that the listening part of the prayer is so important. Just like you said, the being able to hear God's voice. Sometimes we try to fill all the space, especially those with us with like lots of tabs open in our brain all the time. I hear this a lot, especially for women who have ADHD or things like that. It's like there's all these tabs open and I can't focus. So I need music to help me focus in prayer. I need something extra. And there's nothing wrong with that. But I would just encourage you to try to start even very smallly of 1 minute of quiet and then build to 2 minutes. If you have to start with 30 seconds, whatever it is, and just build that muscle, I promise it will come of just listening so that you don't miss out on those beautiful messages from the Lord. And whatever your prayer life is right now, do not compare it to someone else's. Just like Laura said, hers was like a quick word. And if you saw what my plan of life looks like now, it is immensely different. I also was like Laura for much of my life, like, I don't have time to pray, Lord. So this is going to have to be my prayer. I remember I was going through my master's program and I was doing very intense theological work. And I would just tell God, it's 2:00 in the morning. I'm not even going to say a nighttime prayer. This just has to be my prayer today, God, because I don't have time and I don't know how to do anything else. So start where you are and
yeah.
pray as you can,
It's not
not as you
it's
can't.
not about perfection, right? Jacques Philippe talks about that a lot of time. It's just time with God. It doesn't have to be the perfection is going to come later on, but you don't have to be perfect at it out of the gate. The Lord he doesn't want your perfection. He wants your presence.
Absolutely.
And that's the most important thing. And again, start small. I love like building that muscle. That's a really beautiful way to put that with that, and give yourself that compassion. It will come. It will come.
This has been so wonderful. I'm so grateful to you, Laura, and all of the work that you are doing and the women that you are helping and the way that you have helped me in better understanding myself too. If people want to find you, if they want to learn more about the work that you do with the M Code, where can they find you?
So I have a website. So it's laurarolandcoaching.com. I also hang out a lot on Instagram. So I am Laura Roland dot this woman's journey on Instagram. So, DM me there or, reach out through my website. I'm also on Facebook and LinkedIn. You can find me in all those usual places. Would love to chat with anybody. You can book a discovery call. We could do a virtual happy hour, coffee, beverage of choice, whatever, chat with you a little bit. And then I offer a variety of coaching packages. So I work with individuals. I work with Catholic coaches. I work with servant leaders. So those are Catholic business leaders and nonprofit leaders. I work with schools. I'll work with anybody because people need to know about MCode. So you
The
can
other
find me
thing I
everywhere.
love about you too is, this isn't a super long time commitment. You are so efficient at what you do. It's like, hey, I'm going to help you. You're going to get what you need, and then you're going to be able to go thrive doing what you need
Yeah.
to do. So If you're thinking of this, and it's like, oh, but I'm one of those, I'm impulsive. And we talked about grasping at all the things. This is not a long time commitment to work with you. This is get in, do the work that you need to do, and move forward.
Yeah. So it's applied coaching. So you lead with actionable steps and a lot of language to use moving forward. I'm available, to anybody for gap coaching, which is basically like for about 30 days afterwards, questions come up or you have a quick like, hey, what about this or what about this? And so that's included in coaching packages that I offer. But yeah, typically I anywhere from 1 hour, a 1 hour session to 3 1 hour sessions if you want to do a really, really deep dive. I also have I'm stating a group coaching call on Fridays. So that's open for 5 people. If you want to hop on and you just have a quick question or you want to see what the coaching is about or whatever. So there's lots of ways to get your M code done and to get a little bit of coaching if you don't want even a 1 hour commitment. There's ways to get a little.
Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for sharing all of your wisdom and your beautiful stories. You are truly a gift from God, and I'm so grateful for all the work that you are doing. And again, for your obedience to just going wherever it is that He calls you. So thank you for being here.
Kylie, thank you so much. I love that the Lord already knew this conversation was going to happen. I think He is. I think He's just delighted. I do. I think two beloved daughters got together and really did something beautiful for God today. So thank you for the invitation and thank you for reaching out. And God bless you as you continue working with the women that you are helping. It's so needed. And you are doing some amazing things, sister. So proud of you.
Thank you. And for anyone who wants to get in contact with Laura, again, if you missed what she said, I will post those links in the show notes so you can find them there. Beautiful souls, thank you again for journeying with me. If you have been blessed by this episode, it would mean the world to me if you would leave a review. Be sure to screenshot it, share it on your social media stories, and don't forget to tag me on Instagram or Facebook at Kylie M. Hine. Stay persistent in prayer, protect your peace, and as always, share the light of Christ with everyone around you.